Hi friends, welcome to this IELTS listening practice video. This video contains all of the practice you'll need for your IELTS listening test because it actually consists of 5 full tests with answers after each question. This will be great practice for you because you can check how well you're doing as you go through the tests. Okay, we'll start with test number 1 in just 1 second, but I want to say if you're new to this channel, hi, I'm teacher Luke from EnglishTestReady.com. If you think this video is helpful, give it a big thumbs up and hit that subscribe button. Doing those 2 things really does help me a lot. Okay then, well let's get started with listening test number 1. I hope this is helpful and good luck.
First, you have some time to look at questions 1 to 5. Now we shall begin. You should answer the questions as you listen because you will not hear the recording a second time. Listen carefully and answer questions 1 to 5.
Hi Joseph, how are you today?
Fine, thanks.
And Cara, how are you?
Good.
As we discussed on the phone earlier, I wanted to speak with both of you about the subjects you have chosen to study and how you are managing your time. Okay?
Yes.
I think so.
Okay, so I'll start with Cara. You've been here for how many months now?
I've been here for 6 months.
How are you finding it?
It's good. I'm enjoying the course.
And what about life outside? Are you making friends and socializing?
Not really. People here are quite closed. They don't talk to you.
I see. So, what do you do after classes?
I usually go home and study, and I might go out for a walk, but never really with anyone. Sometimes my roommate Louisa comes with me, but she always seems to be busy.
How is this affecting your schoolwork?
I don't think it is, but I miss home.
Cara, what I suggest for now is that you look into joining one of the social clubs on campus. There are a variety of them. You can go camping, skiing, snorkeling, painting, dancing, reading, horse riding, rowing. There's a list on the school website. Have a look and work out which one you're interested in and which suits your timetable. You'll meet friends that way and people who have the same career interests as you. As for the subjects you've chosen for a career in microbiology, I think you should look into dropping one of your subjects and picking it up again next year as a minor. You have a lot on your plate, and this will just cause great pressure. It doesn't mean that you aren't coping, but you're doing about 10 hours more than the average student a week. Think about it, and we can make another appointment to discuss it. When are you free?
I have an hour free usually on Wednesdays at 11:30.
Okay, good. Come to my office at 11:45 and wait in reception. Okay?
Okay, I'll see you then.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 6 to 10. Now listen and answer questions 6 to 10.
Joseph, how are you finding the university?
I love it. It's very different from home. Life here is very much focused on study and also socializing through sport. People have been very friendly and curious about my culture.
So, you've managed to integrate well?
I think so. I've joined the rugby team, something I'd never thought I'd be interested in.
And how are your studies going?
I think I am doing well. I have a few assignments that need some work, but overall, I'm coping.
That's good. I'm happy that you're enjoying the university, but remember, don't let your schoolwork get too far behind, because it will pile up and before you know it, you will be late handing in work. You know that there's a penalty for handing in work late?
No, I didn't.
You would have been told at the start of the course, during orientation.
I don't remember.
You need to remember these things. They are very important. You might be an excellent student, but if you consistently hand in work late, you'll be penalised and you might end up losing your degree over it. That's a lot of years of work, okay?
Yes, I'll remember that.
And also remember that you have to attend 90% of your classes. So far, you have missed 5 tutorials. Be careful here. These could also cost you your degree. Is there any particular reason you missed these classes?
I'd been training for our rugby match the night before and, well, we went out afterwards and I slept past my alarm clock.
Joseph, I know this culture must be very different from where you come from, but please try and be a little more conservative with your time. I think maybe you should spend more time on your studies and less time on socialising. The subjects you've chosen are intensive. I want you to spend 3 hours a night studying before you decide to do anything else. I'll make an appointment to see you in a month and we can assess your progress. I'll give you my business card. All my contact details are there. Call me in 3 weeks to organise another meeting. Do you have any questions for me?
No, none.
OK, I'll see you in a month.
That is the end of part 1. Part 2.
You'll hear a man talking about living and working on Trinidad. First, you have some time to look at questions 11 to 15. Now listen carefully and answer questions 11 to 15.
Hi, I'm Steve Pinfold, and I'm here today to tell you about my gap year, which I took about 20 years ago. Unlike many students these days who go travelling or get some work experience between school and university, I decided to do something completely different after finishing my degree. I applied to work for a charity organisation. What it does is it sends people with particular skills to countries where those skills are needed. Apart from having some experience teaching English to summer school students, I didn't have any particularly useful skills, I thought, but luckily I was still accepted. I had to find the money for the flight, but you get free accommodation. I stayed with a family of 5. And you do get paid, but not much. It's a bit like pocket money, enough to get by. I worked in an orphanage and taught English at a local school. Where was I? Well, originally I was going to be sent to a village in India, but at the last minute the organisation decided to send me to Trinidad. Now, this is a fascinating place. It's an island in the Caribbean. Well, in fact, the country is actually 2 islands. The smaller one is called Tobago, which is connected somehow to the word tobacco. Anyway, there I was, a young white guy living and working on an island which is mostly a mixture of descendants from Africa and India. The Africans were originally brought over as slaves, and the Indians came later as indentured workers. That means they agreed to come for a specific time, but many of them stayed. There are also some Trinidadians of Chinese and British origin, though the native inhabitants were basically wiped out by colonialization. I myself felt completely accepted and had the time of my life. The language everyone speaks is English, so there was no problem for me there, but some concepts don't quite translate. They're pure Trinidadian. There's the term liming, for example, which means sitting around watching the world go by. Also, there's the famous carnival, when the whole island is taken up in playing mass. For a whole month, around February or March, it depends when Easter is, everyone's busy preparing costumes, practicing calypsos, soca and steel pan music, and most importantly, partying.
Before you hear the rest of the talk, you have some time to look at questions 16 to 20. Now listen and answer questions 16 to 20.
When the actual official carnival starts, it's days of 24-hour dancing in the streets. In Trinidad, it's called whining. You've probably seen this sort of thing on TV, in the more famous carnival in Rio, or even at the Notting Hill Carnival in London. Many people joined bands, each one of which has a theme. For example, the Sea or Jungle Fever, and they have costumes designed and made to go with the theme. These can cost $1,000 for the king and queen of each band. They're incredible. The whole city is a non-stop party zone, full of colour and sound. It's serious too. The bands are in competition and the winner gets $1 million. Sorry, I got a bit carried away with those memories. Back to my real job there. The orphanage was called St. Augustine's, and that's also the name of the place where it was, St. Augustine, a town just outside the capital city, Port of Spain. I didn't have any particular job description, just to be with the children and tell stories, sing songs and play games. Oh, and we also went camping in the jungle once. I could tell you a few stories about that particular escapade. Every time I arrived at the gate, kids would come running towards me, shouting, with big smiles on their faces. The younger children seemed fascinated by my blonde hair and loved to touch it as if it was something miraculous. The English teaching I did 2 days a week in a primary school for 6 to 11-year-olds. The kids may have been poor, but they all wore neat and clean uniforms and were so respectful and enthusiastic. I've now been teaching for many years in different countries, and I still think those were the best students I've ever taught. What else did I do while I was there? I swam a lot. Can you imagine what it's like swimming with dolphins and with pelicans diving into the sea right next to you? More seriously, I trained to be a Samaritan. That's someone who listens and supports people who have problems with their lives. Overall, what I took from the experience was a sense of being in another culture, or rather cultures. As humans, we all share many characteristics, but we express ourselves in various ways. In Trinidad, there are lots of different communities and religions, and so many different kinds of festival to see. Hindu, Muslim, Christian, as well as some rather mysterious African traditions. There are quite a few Rastafarians too. Trinidad is, as Americans are fond of saying of their own country, a melting pot, where everybody is greeted warmly. Go and see for yourself. I'm not sure how it's changed since I was there, but I'd love to find out.
That is the end of part 2.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
That is the end of part 2.
Part 3.
You will hear a student of landscape architecture discussing a project with his tutor. First, you have some time to look at questions 21 to 24. Now listen carefully and answer questions 21 to 24.
So, let's hear what you're doing for your next project.
I've decided to design a roof garden for a supermarket. I've been looking at some on the web, and I think that a garden on top of a building is the up-and-coming thing.
Okay. So you've done a bit of reading already?
Mm-hmm.
What benefits would there be for the client? Why do you think a supermarket chain would be willing to meet the expense of construction? You do realize that would be the first thing they raise.
Yes, I know. But I'd explain that in spite of the initially high expense, they would save that much in approximately 5 years. Well, I'd have to do sums. Calculate specifically.
Yes. How would the saving come about?
Mainly through lower heating and aircon bills. The extra insulation offered by having a layer of living plants in the soil would make a huge difference.
Okay. But they might feel the expense of maintenance would be an issue. After all, supermarkets don't normally employ gardeners.
What I thought was, if they made it a community garden, rather than a simple, low-maintenance green roof...
So there'd be public access?
Oh, yes. Then there'd be a sense of ownership in the local community, and people could take responsibility for it, instead of the supermarket paying a commercial company, and it'd really boost their public relations.
That's a good point. And have you been looking into how roof gardens are built nowadays?
I'm still exploring that. But if I take advantage of the latest technologies for roof gardens, it shouldn't be too difficult. But in any case, you have to use lightweight materials.
But that's a matter of making the right choices. You can even use quite traditional ones, such as wood, for the planting areas.
Yes, that's what I thought. It'll look good, and it isn't too heavy.
But for the basic construction, the issue you have to address first is the material used between the building and the garden.
You mean the barrier fabric, which ensures there's no chance of rainwater leaking down into the building?
Yes. Nowadays that is very good and quite easily sourced.
Then, on the other hand, there's the business of water within the roof garden itself.
You mean drainage? That's an important feature of the construction in any roof design.
Yes, but I think most drainage issues have been well understood for quite a long time.
Okay. But another thing is with plants in an exposed situation, you usually need to find ways to optimize rainfall.
Yes, because rainwater is best for the garden, if you can store it for when it's needed. What I've been looking at are some buildings which use fairly conventional storage tanks, the kind that have been in use for decades, but have them linked to modern automatic watering systems.
Sounds complicated.
It's less so in practice than it sounds, I think. I've been researching them, and actually the latest ones definitely work very well, and they can be electronically regulated to suit the local microclimate.
That sounds interesting. You seem to have been doing some thorough research. Make sure you reference all your sources when you write it up.
Yes, sure. There's one more aspect I'd just like to run past you if there's time. I want to include a light feature in the design.
Of course.
I've got a sketch here.
Let's have a look then.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 25 to 30. Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 25 to 30. Now listen and answer questions 25 to 30.
Well, I was really impressed by something I saw on a roof in Cornwall, and I'd like to design something similar. You have an area of planting, and I'm thinking of installing this lighting in an area filled with low-growing evergreen shrubs.
You'd have to have lights and things well away from anywhere children might be. but I can see this could be very effective, if a bit complicated. How would it work? On this drawing, this is a section view. You have this low wall on the right.
Yes, that's it. This is just one element, and these areas would be repeated all round the planted area. I think this will probably be a wooden wall using reclaimed timbers with an angled ceramic top surface.
Perhaps even ridge tiles, like they use on roofs?
Ah, yes. That'd be just the sort of thing. And that'd make it weatherproof. And then the heavy-duty electric wiring comes up through the floor just outside the planted area and into the wall. Then it's brought through to a projector low in the side of the wall, and that sends a beam of light along the fibre optic cable.
So there's no electricity in the actual lights. The fibre optic goes across the surface of the soil in the planting area.
Yes, that's the beauty of it. The shrubs will soon grow to cover it up, of course. And then the cable goes past a wooden post, which is between the shrubs and can be a support for them as they grow bigger, and then runs up into each element of the installation.
So the light beam is carried up to the top of each element and illuminates a kind of conical glass cap? I see. Is that the bit which would glow in the dark?
Yes.
And what's the cap supported on? Is it a wall?
No, it's a slender acrylic rod, like the stem of a flower or mushroom, which the cable runs up inside of.
Well, I'll be interested to see the final drawings.
Oh, thank you. I'm looking forward to putting it all together.
That is the end of part 3. You now have 30 seconds to check your answers to part 3. That is the end of part 3. Part 4.
You will hear a geography student giving a presentation about sand to fellow students. First, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 40. Now listen carefully and answer questions 31 to 40.
First, I would like to tell you how the Argus computerized photography system has helped marine researchers. Then I shall talk a bit about sand collecting. Well, Argus is the system Dr. Rob Holman developed when he was working at a research pier on the coast of North Carolina about 20 years ago. This pier stretches out over the water, and it's the longest research pier in the world, with an observation tower on the end of it. The researchers there make precise measurements of how the sand moves about under the waves. This research is critical to the study of beach erosion in places where the coastline is being worn away. The Argus system helps to solve the difficulties encountered by these researchers. The system correlates the data from under the water with what Dr. Holman gets from his fixed camera, which is mounted above the water on the pier and uses time-lapse photography. Some of Dr. Holman's results have changed the way people understand how sand moves. To quote S. Jeffries Williams, a coastal geologist with the United States Geological Survey, the system is a critical piece of new technology. And the Argus system allows us to quantify and document visually the changes to the coast on a variety of different time frames. A lot of these take place when there is a storm, or at other times when it is difficult to have people out on the beach making observations and taking measurements. Up to now, Argus installations have been installed in places in Oregon, California, Hawaii, England, the Netherlands, Australia, New Zealand, Spain, Italy and Brazil, as well as in North Carolina. Now, I'd like to introduce Dr. Holman's sand collection. He started collecting sand in the 1980s, and he still collects it now, even though he has around 1,000 samples. They come from his travels and from geologists and amateurs all over the world, and the collection includes sand from each continent, including Antarctica. People send him sand in envelopes, plastic bags, paper towels, and all sorts. Each is stored in a glass jar, which Dr. Holman labels by latitude and longitude of its origin, as well as he can work them out. Sometimes the information is a bit sketchy. Anyway, it's mainly geology students at the university who study his collection, and they can learn a lot from it. For instance, one set of tubes displays sand from the east coast of the US, so you can see that the sand gets lighter and finer from north to south. By the time a grain of sand eventually washes up on a beach in Florida, at the southern end of that journey, it has been battered by waves for a long time, so the grains are fine and rounded, because most of the time sand is not stationary on the beach. Okay, so if you'd like to collect sand and maybe even send some to Dr. Holman, how should you go about it? Well, the list of equipment is very short and easy to find, but you should keep a supply when you're travelling, as you never know when you'll come across an interesting sand sample. One really handy thing for digging sand, especially if it's hard or frozen, is a spoon. It's perfect for that. If you're travelling by air, it'll have to be plastic, but metal is preferable, as plastic tends to break. You need something to put the samples in that is damp-proof and easy to carry. You can just use plastic bags, but you need to record the location and date on the bag, so you must also have a permanent marker with you, because you can never assume you will remember where you gathered a sample from later on, and you don't want it to rub off before you get home. And that's about all you need in the field to collect sand. When you get home, your samples should be logged in a notebook or computer. You need to note the location and be really specific as to exactly whereabouts on the beach you gathered your sample, low tide mark, under cliff area, etc. Then you store your sample. You want to keep everything in good condition and avoid contamination. So first you make absolutely sure that each sample is perfectly dry. You don't need any complicated apparatus for this. You can just air it out on layers of newspaper, which is suitably absorbent. Most people find that's the best way. Then, lastly, but this is really important, before there can be any chance of confusing this latest sample with another, you put it in a clean small bag or a jar, and you must stick an identification label on straight away. Some people put one inside as well, in case the outer label falls off, but that's up to you. Well, that's about all you need to know to get started as a sand collector. Any questions?
That is the end of part 4. Part 1.
You will hear a man who runs a recruitment agency talking to a young woman looking for a job. First, you have some time to look at questions 1 to 6. Now we shall begin. You should answer the questions as you listen, because you will not hear the recording a second time. Listen carefully and answer questions 1 to 6.
Hello, Edwina, is it? Have a seat.
Yes, Edwina. Thanks. I'm looking for a job as a nanny. I like working with children. I talked to you yesterday.
Oh, yes. Well, we covered most of the ground on the phone yesterday. I've got a form I need to complete for my records. So, you're Edwina Riley, and how should we contact you?
Oh, by email. I check it regularly.
What's the address?
It's Edwina, like my name, then R-I, the first two letters of my surname, at worldnet.com.
EDWINARI at worldnet.com?
Yes.
Good. And you're from Australia?
Actually, I'm a New Zealander.
Oh, I'm sorry. I bet it's really irritating being told you're an Australian. Like Canadians being asked what part of the States they're from.
I'm used to it. It happens to us all the time.
And now, you said on the phone that you could bring me some references. One from someone who's known you in a professional capacity and one personal one.
Oh, yeah. Here's one from John Keane, who was the manager at the Play Centre in Wellington, where I worked for 3 years after I left school. It's got all his contact details on.
Thank you. So, this was your last employer?
Yes, apart from a bit of waitressing recently, but that was just temporary. I'm sure John will answer any questions if you contact him.
We do run checks, yes. And a personal reference?
Oh, you can contact the friend of my mother's I'm staying with here in London, Eileen Dorsini. She's a professor. She's known me all my life because she used to be our neighbour back home when she was a primary school teacher there. Now she's working here at the Institute of Education.
Oh, good.
I've got her contact details here for you.
Thanks. I think I have some jobs to suit you. Oh, do you have any practical qualifications, by the way? Life-saving, music, anything?
I've got an up-to-date first aid certificate. I did a course when I was working.
That's good. First aid. Anything else?
Well, I've got a driving licence, as I told you on the phone, but that's not special, you said. Almost everyone needs that, really. I've got a sailing qualification. It's a certificate of competence.
So you're a yachtswoman?
I love sailing.
Well, I'll note you have a certificate.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 7 to 10. Now listen and answer questions 7 to 10.
Now, as I mentioned yesterday, there are 3 families, and the job description is much the same for all of them, as I explained. There are a few other things you need to know. Anyway, the first family is here in London.
Yes, I did make a few notes. London, that's the Bentons with 2 children?
Yes, that's right. A girl of 3 and her brother, who's 8. The little boy has a quite serious food allergy. Did you learn about things like that on your course?
Oh, well, I know what to do if someone has an allergic reaction.
Good. But what they mainly want is someone with an interest in sport, as, well, that's the kind of family they are.
Oh, that's okay. I'll enjoy that.
Good. Now, the next people are in the country near Oxford.
Oh, yeah, the Grangers?
Yeah, so they have twin boys of 5 who are a bit of a handful, I suspect. But it's a lovely place, quite a grand house, and the family is extremely welcoming. They keep horses. Do you ride?
I did when I was younger. I like animals generally.
Well, Animal Lover was their special request, so you'd be fine there. The last family...
Yes?
I don't think I told you. They live in Scotland.
Really? What's their name?
Campbell.
Oh, yes. And they have 4 girls under 10?
That's it. They have a lovely city flat, and they own a small island.
Wow!
Actually, you might get on with them very well. They particularly wanted someone who would be prepared to cook when they go camping on the island.
Camping would really suit me, and I'm used to taking my turn doing the food, but it is a long way from London.
Yeah, well, you can think about it. Then, as soon as I've checked your references, we can arrange for you to talk to all of the families.
Right. Thanks very much.
Thank you. I'll email you as soon as I can.
Part 2.
You will hear a woman talking to a group of people who are looking round a sports and leisure centre. First, you have some time to look at questions 11 to 14. Now listen and answer questions 11 to 14.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm very pleased to be able to welcome you to Cityscope, our lovely modern sports and leisure facility. I've brought you up to the rooftop cafe on top of the stadium so that you can enjoy the view while I explain briefly what we have here and point out to you the major features of the site. Then we'll go round and have a look at ground level.
Oh, that'd be interesting. I'm glad.
We're extremely proud of this new facility. You see, when the project was first discussed, we expected that a multinational company would give us half our funding, and the central government grant would make up most of the rest, with a smaller contribution from local business. Well, we'd got quite far into the planning stage when the multinational pulled out, and both central and local government decided they couldn't afford anything. So we ended up with a beautiful project, a small amount of sponsorship promised by local organisations, and nothing else. We thought we'd never build it, but at the last moment we had an amazing donation of several £million from a national transport company, and that got us going again. And we managed to get all the rest from local fundraising. There's hardly a street in the city that hasn't made its contribution one way or another. So there's a true sense of local ownership here. So this is what we got. We wanted a new stadium because the 1950s football stadium is on the other side of town and is shortly due to be pulled down and built over. This site was the old airport, with some playing fields on one side of it, and a few buildings from the 1930s when the airfield first opened. So, we were able to plan a new stadium with plenty of room for all the things people wanted. The playing fields have been upgraded and refenced, so they are now a set of top-quality outdoor pitches for amateur football, hockey and so on. We have both sports and other entertainments here. We want to encourage all kinds of people onto the site and hope some of them may come to use the cinema or the cafe and end up trying the fitness centre. These are all grouped together. The cafe is in the original 1930s passenger hall, and the architects have managed to retain some of the elegant style of the building. The other buildings, like the control tower, which would have made a great feature, and the aircraft hangars, which we had hoped might house the fitness centre, were unfortunately not structurally sound enough to preserve. So, everything else is newly built, opened in 2010.
Before you hear the rest of the talk, you have some time to look at questions 15 to 20. Now listen and answer questions 15 to 20.
Right. Now, if you'd like to gather a little closer to the window, I'll point out the various buildings. We're at the highest point of the stadium here in the rooftop cafe, on the opposite side to the main entrance doors. On our left, you can see two buildings just beyond the end of the stadium. The closest one is the business centre, used for meetings and conferences and so on, which provides a good source of revenue for the upkeep of the sports facilities. And next to the business centre, the bigger building is the hotel, which is rented from us by an independent company. As you see, they are served by the perimeter road, which runs round 3/4 of the site. Now, coming round to the front of the building, immediately in front of the entrance, that circular open space at the end of the road is the transport hub. From here, there are buses and a monorail link to the free car park, about 10 minutes from here, but you can't see that. There's also a large secure cycle park. Oh, and disabled parking, of course. People find it's very convenient and it keeps the site virtually car-free. OK, now if you look as far as you can over to the right, beyond the buildings, you can see our outdoor pitches, which I mentioned earlier. Between the pitches and the entrance is a little kind of pedestrian plaza. Are you with me? OK, with the cinema in the building furthest away from us, next to the pitches. Then there's the 10-pin bowling between the cinema and the road. Near the far end of the perimeter road, and between the mini roundabout and the pitches, there's our fitness centre, with all kinds of equipment and a small pool, and changing rooms for teams using the pitches. Then, joined onto the stadium, next to the entrance, is a range of small shops, which all specialise in sports equipment, clothes, shoes. They sell toys and so on as well, all that sort of thing. They seem to be doing well. As you see, the service road goes right round, but we keep the traffic and the pedestrians well apart. So it's all very relaxed round the plaza, popular with families. And just in front of the bowling is our lovely restaurant. You can see it from here. It's that building on the plaza between us and the bowling. It's open all day and in the evenings. There's quite a queue there at weekends, I'm pleased to say. So, now you've got the layout, we can go and have a closer look at everything.
Oh, nice.
Part 3.
You will hear two people called Chloe and Ivan talking about a business studies course. First, you have some time to look at questions 21 to 25. Now listen carefully and answer questions 21 to 25.
Oh, hi, Ivan.
Oh, hi, Chloe.
I'm glad I bumped into you because I've been looking at this prospectus about courses at the university. I'm thinking of doing a business studies degree. Isn't that what you're doing?
Yes, I'm about to start my 3rd year. I think you'd enjoy it. Is there something on the course that you're not sure about?
Well, you know I've been working for a publisher for the last 4 years as a production assistant.
That will be really valuable experience because a lot of people go to university straight from school and don't have that kind of background.
Yeah, I know. And I'm used to dealing with figures and percentages and things, but it's been a while since I've sat down and put my ideas into an essay. I was never that good at it, and I'm not sure I can do it now.
But you did okay at school, so I'm sure you'll soon get into it again. I was worried about different things when I started, like if I'd be able to use all the computer programs. But you only really need the basics. You have to do a lot of presentations, and I thought that would be hard. But we'd actually had such a lot of practice at school, it was fine.
But did you find writing essays easy?
It was okay, but I was hopeless at getting them in by the deadline. And I was always late for lectures, so I had to work hard at that, and I tend to be early now.
It's good that you've sorted yourself out before you go and get a job, or you might not have it very long. I think the course looks really interesting.
It is. And it also gave me the chance to spend 6 months working in a local business last year.
That's not so important for me, unless I could go abroad to use my foreign languages. But that doesn't seem to be on offer, which is a shame. What really appeals to me, though, is the idea of being assessed throughout the year. I think that's a much more productive way of learning, instead of everything being decided in an exam at the end.
It's good for people like you who are hard-working all year round. You'll be spending all your time in the library. They've just expanded it too.
That's good.
Well, yes and no. They've made the study area bigger, but it means they've taken some of the magazines and periodicals away. So I think it was better as it was. The university is expanding all the time, and there are lots of new courses coming next year.
Well, that's great news, isn't it? It means the college will have a better reputation, as more people will hear about it. So that's good for us.
I agree, but they really need to add more lecture rooms, as we often have lectures in tiny rooms.
Well, you obviously think overall it's a good place to do a degree. I should probably go and have a look round.
Well, it's holidays now, and there's not much going on there.
Oh, so it's probably not worth going in now.
But you could email my tutor. I know he'd be happy to answer any questions. I can give you his email address. I looked at quite a lot of other universities and read loads of prospectuses, but I thought this one was the best.
Now listen and answer questions 26 to 30.
I was a bit unsure about all the different subjects you can choose on this course.
Well, I can tell you a bit about them. There are some subjects you have to do and some that you can choose. The most interesting course I've done is public relations.
From what I've read, it doesn't look very demanding. Some of it is really just common sense.
But it will be really useful if you want to go into marketing or advertising.
That's true. But I need to find out a bit more about it first before I decide if it will really help me. It's difficult to tell from the prospectus.
But you are interested in marketing?
Oh, yes.
Well, you can choose a marketing course. I wasn't very impressed with that course, actually. The tutor didn't make it very interesting.
It's good to put on your CV that you've done a marketing course, though. So that would be a definite for me, and maybe I'd get a different tutor. What other courses did you choose?
I'm doing taxation, as I was thinking of training to be an accountant, but I'm not sure now.
Oh, That will be a good option for me, because I enjoy working with figures. Although I don't want to be an accountant, it'll be good to have an understanding of taxation, especially if I ever run my own business.
Then there's the most popular course, which is human resources, and a lot of people seem to get jobs in that field.
My friend works in human resources, and she's really good at it. But I don't think I've got the right personality, so I'd give that one a miss. I'm more interested in how businesses actually work, the structure.
That's a compulsory course, the structure of business.
Oh.
But you might find information systems helpful.
Is that kind of computer programs?
Some of it is, but also databases, project management, and other things.
Oh, this sounds useful. But I'll have to look at some of the other possibilities first. You know, Ivan, this course sounds as though it would suit me. I'm going to apply.
Great. If there's anything else you want to ask me, you've got my number.
Thanks.
Part 4.
You will hear a geography student giving a presentation about sand to fellow students. First, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 40. Now listen carefully and answer questions 31 to 40.
First, I would like to tell you how the Argus computerized photography system has helped marine researchers. Then I shall talk a bit about sand collecting. Well, Argus is the system Dr. Rob Holman developed when he was working at a research pier on the coast of North Carolina about 20 years ago. This pier stretches out over the water, and it's the longest research pier in the world, with an observation tower on the end of it. The researchers there make precise measurements of how the sand moves about under the waves. This research is critical to the study of beach erosion in places where the coastline is being worn away. The Argus system helps to solve the difficulties encountered by these researchers. The system correlates the data from under the water with what Dr. Holman gets from his fixed camera, which is mounted above the water on the pier, and uses time-lapse photography. Some of Dr. Holman's results have changed the way people understand how sand moves. To quote S. Jeffreys Williams, a coastal geologist with the United States Geological Survey, the system is a critical piece of new technology, and the Argus system allows us to quantify and document visually the changes to the coast on a variety of different time frames. A lot of these take place when there is a storm, or at other times when it is difficult to have people out on the beach making observations and taking measurements. Up to now, Argus installations have been installed in places in Oregon, California, Hawaii, England, the Netherlands, Australia, New Zealand, Spain, Italy, and Brazil, as well as in North Carolina. Now, I'd like to introduce Dr. Holman's sand collection. He started collecting sand in the 1980s, and he still collects it now, even though he has around 1,000 samples. They come from his travels and from geologists and amateurs all over the world, and the collection includes sand from each continent, including Antarctica. People send him sand in envelopes, plastic bags, paper towels, and all sorts. Each is stored in a glass jar, which Dr. Holman labels by latitude and longitude of its origin, as well as he can work them out. Sometimes the information is a bit sketchy. Anyway, it's mainly geology students at the university who study his collection, and they can learn a lot from it. For instance, one set of tubes displays sand from the east coast of the US, so you can see that the sand gets lighter and finer from north to south. By the time a grain of sand eventually washes up on a beach in Florida, at the southern end of that journey, it has been battered by waves for a long time, so the grains are fine and rounded, because most of the time sand is not stationary on the beach. Okay, so if you'd like to collect sand and maybe even send some to Dr. Holman, how should you go about it? Well, the list of equipment is very short and easy to find, but you should keep a supply when you're travelling, as you never know when you'll come across an interesting sand sample. One really handy thing for digging sand, especially if it's hard or frozen, is a spoon. It's perfect for that. If you're travelling by air, it'll have to be plastic, but metal is preferable, as plastic tends to break. You need something to put the samples in that is damp-proof and easy to carry. You can just use plastic bags, but you need to record the location and date on the bag, so you must also have a permanent marker with you, because you can never assume you will remember where you gathered a sample from later on, and you don't want it to rub off before you get home. And that's about all you need in the field to collect sand. When you get home, your samples should be logged in a notebook or computer. You need to note the location and be really specific as to exactly whereabouts on the beach you gathered your sample, low tide mark, under cliff area, etc. Then you store your sample. You want to keep everything in good condition and avoid contamination. So first you make absolutely sure that each sample is perfectly dry. You don't need any complicated apparatus for this. You can just air it out on layers of newspaper, which is suitably absorbent. Most people find that's the best way. Then, lastly, but this is really important, before there can be any chance of confusing this later sample with another, you put it in a clean small bag or a jar, and you must stick an identification label on straight away. Some people put one inside as well, in case the outer label falls off, but that's up to you. Well, that's about all you need to know to get started as a sand collector. Any questions?
That is the end of Part 4. Part 1.
You will hear a conversation between a tax office employee and a woman who wants to apply for a tax number. First, you have some time to look at questions 1 to 4. Now we shall begin. You should answer the questions as you listen, because you will not hear the recording a second time. Listen carefully and answer questions 1 to 4.
Good morning, tax office. How can I help you?
I'd like to apply for a tax file number.
Are you a citizen?
No, but I'm told I still need a number.
So what is your residency status? Are you a permanent migrant, or perhaps a temporary visitor?
Oh, I'm a permanent migrant.
And you need a TFN?
A what?
A TFN. It stands for tax file number.
Yes, what is that exactly?
It's a unique number we issue to individuals and organizations to help administer tax collection and other government systems.
Why do I need one?
In actual fact, you don't.
What do you mean?
It's not compulsory, you know.
But I should get one?
Well, it's a good idea. Otherwise, you'll have more tax withheld from your wages or salary. In fact, you won't be eligible to participate in the PAYE, that's pay-as-you-earn system, and you couldn't apply for income support or other benefits. You wouldn't have to pay the Medicare levy, But then you wouldn't be entitled to claim Medicare benefits either.
I'd better have one then.
Okay. So you're currently living in this country, right?
Yes.
What kind of visa do you have? A working visa?
Well, I did have one because after my student visa expired, I went back home and worked for a year before applying for a job here. The job turned out to be permanent and full-time, and my employers wanted me to settle here. So now I have a permanent migrant visa.
Now, once you have a file number, you never need to reapply. Even if your circumstances change, for example, if you get married or decide to take an English name, they'll even use the same one when you retire and apply for a government pension.
I see.
Have you ever had a TFN before?
No.
Right. Let's get on with the application process now.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 5 to 10. Now listen and answer questions 5 to 10.
What is your passport or travel document number?
Oh, just a moment. I have it here. JGW 1100536.
Where do you come from?
I came from Greece.
Is that your country of origin?
Yes, I came from Greece.
Are you Greek? Do you have a Greek passport?
No, I was born in Spain. I have a Spanish passport, but I've been living in Greece.
And where do you live now? Where will the department send your TFN?
That's 1339 Harbor Drive, Hollywell.
Postcode?
1517.
Thank you. Now, what's the best way to get in touch with you?
By phone, you can ring my landline number, 0955775076. I'm sorry, I haven't got a cell phone at the moment.
I see. Can you give me the details of someone else we could contact if we can't get you during office hours?
That would be my landlady.
What's her name?
Martha Pierce.
Is that Pierce, P-I-E-R-C-E?
No, it's P-E-A-R-C-E.
And her number is?
The same as the one I gave you.
Yes, I've got that. Now, for some more personal details, what title do you use?
Excuse me?
Are you Mrs., Miss, or Ms.?
I'm not married. Put me down as Miss.
All right. What's your surname?
Farina.
What's your first name?
Maria.
Do you have a second or middle name?
Well, 2, actually.
What are they?
Rosa Anna.
I'm guessing Farina is your maiden name, since you haven't been married. But are you known by any other names?
Farina is my only surname, but people call me Mary.
As a first name?
Yes.
When were you born, Mary? Can you give it to me in the following order? Day, month, and year?
The 15th of November, 1983.
You're obviously female. So that brings me to the last question, which I don't really need to ask.
What's that?
Your husband's name.
I don't have one.
I know. So I'll just write down N.A. for not applicable.
Thank you.
That is the end of part 1. Part 2.
You will hear a talk about keeping children safe on the Internet. First, you have some time to look at questions 11 to 16. Listen carefully and answer questions 11 to 16.
Thank you for coming. It's good to see so many of you interested in keeping your children safe on the Internet. What's in store?
Well, firstly, I'm going to talk in general about some common sense ideas and rules for young ones using the computer. Then, I'll give you some information on free educational websites. Finally, we'll finish with question time. I'm sure most of you think that the internet can be a frightening place in which to let your children roam loose. But let me remind you that it can also be a fountain of knowledge and education. The trick is to avoid the former and utilize the latter. There are programs available both in your local electronics supply shop and free to download that will keep your child safe to a certain degree on the World Wide Web. A popular one is Online Family Norris, which bars things like military and social websites. I wouldn't advise you to rely solely on a program to protect your family, though. As good as it is, you cannot abdicate your responsibility as a parent. I'm sure you all know that, or you wouldn't be here. When all is said and done, the best way to keep children safe is to educate them and keep an eye on them. For this reason, you should make sure the computer which your child uses is kept in a communal space, where you can look over their shoulder from time to time. It is paramount that you teach them never to divulge their proper or full name, and to never provide personal information, such as where they live or what their phone number is. Tell them that online friends must remain just that, online, unless they are supervised. It is difficult, I know, to teach children about the dangers of the world when they are so naive, so trusting and innocent. But without going into great detail, you must alert them to the possibility that the people they are chatting with may not be who they say they are. It's also sensible not to give them their own email address until they are old enough to use the internet safely. So, all communication from websites will go through you. When they are old enough to use social sites like Facebook and MySpace, teenagers need to know that whatever postings they put on the web will remain accessible forever. Nothing is ever really deleted there. And embarrassing pictures or remarks may come back to haunt them one day. For instance, when they apply for a job, they could jeopardize their chances as the employer or human resources staff will look on the web to find out more about their potential employee, and they may be shocked by what they find there. Not the sort of stuff an applicant would want on his or her CV. It can also make them more vulnerable to bullying. Unfortunately, bullying on social sites is another thing to look out for, and I have to tell you, it's on the increase. It's a very difficult issue to deal with, but something that is more easily detected if the computer is kept in a family space. If we can put these negative issues aside, let's not forget that the internet is also a wonderful place for children of all ages. Teenagers may be mostly networking on social sites or completing research that they've been asked to do as part of their homework assignments, but younger children can get assistance with mathematics, spelling, and reading on a variety of free and paid-for sites.
Before you hear the rest of the talk, you have some time to look at questions 17 to 20. Now listen and answer questions 17 to 20.
A good way for children to learn and have fun at the same time is the website mathtutor.com. They can practice mathematics on this site, no matter what their level, while they compete against other children from all over the world. And here's a fun way for primary school children to learn the spelling words for the week. It can be such a chore for some children. They just type them in and play games to learn them. What's that? The website? Oh, sorry. Yes, you'll need to go to spellcity.com for that. The one I'm going to tell you about now is one of the most practical sites that's popular with people of all ages. Children, or parents for that matter, can learn to touch type as they sing along with songs. And there's a variety of funny characters to help you enjoy yourself as you learn. In this day and age, typing is essential. Everyone should be able to type fast and accurately. So, go to beeb.co/typing and try it out. Don't just leave it up to the kids. Here's a site that parents can use to download worksheets to extend their children by giving them further practice. It's called coolresources.com, and I can really recommend it, particularly for middle school students. Now, are there any questions?
That is the end of part 2. Part 3.
You will hear a conversation between two students in the education department who are discussing their first assignment. First, you have some time to look at questions 21 to 28. Listen carefully and answer questions 21 to 28.
Hey, Ted, what are we going to do about this assignment?
Well, Cleo, I think it's pretty straightforward.
Oh?
Yeah. The topic is, why study abroad? I suggest we do a survey of international students, collate the responses, make a graph, and exhibit our findings in the form of a poster.
Wow, you have given this some thought, haven't you?
Of course. This is only the first assignment. There will be a lot more to come. So let's get this one out of the way quickly.
Well, how do we do the survey?
I think we need to find a good selection of foreign students.
So, how about we go over to the English language school at lunchtime and talk to some of the students there?
That's not a bad idea. But we shouldn't limit ourselves to that department.
Why not?
Well, think about it. They'll all give the same reason. To learn English.
Of course, you're right. Well, one of us could cover the language school, and the other could go around the business school.
Yes, I know there are a lot of internationals there, too. But I think a random sample from foreign students on campus might give us a better range of answers.
What are we going to ask them? Why are you studying abroad?
An open question like that could mean we get hundreds of different responses. It would be better if we made up, say, 10 reasons and asked each respondent to place them in order of importance.
You're right. That would certainly make collation easier. Any ideas about what these 10 reasons might be?
Sure. I've got enough foreign friends to know quite a lot about what motivates them.
Okay. Number 1 is...
I think that's obvious. How about study abroad is the best way to learn a language? And number 2 is obvious as well.
I know. Study abroad gives you the chance to travel.
What's third?
It's either culture or friendship.
Okay, let's go for culture. Study abroad gives you first-hand experience of a different culture.
Not just that, but it gives you new experiences as well. Not all of them are good, but it's meeting those challenges and adapting to new situations and solving problems and so on.
Let's make that a separate reason. How about study abroad, will compel you to develop new skills?
Sounds good. Then study abroad promotes international friendship.
What are we up to now?
Wait, that was number 5.
Do you think learning about yourself is the same as developing new skills?
No, I think it's quite different. Probably more closely related to culture. You really mean embracing new concepts and perceptions, don't you?
Yes, and reconsidering one's own beliefs and values, or at least seeing them through new eyes.
We could make the next one and call it something like, Study abroad provides the opportunity to learn about yourself.
We ought to throw in a few about study and work, because I'm sure that rates highly with many foreign students.
Of course. Study abroad gives you the opportunity to expand your academic,
Academic what? Let's simplify it. Make it the opportunity to study different subjects.
Yes, good. It can also enhance the value of your degree.
How's that?
Well, I think you can take courses you would never have had the opportunity to take on your home campus, and employers will know also that your language skills have been given quite a boost.
Isn't that the same as number 7?
No, I think it's a separate issue.
All right, keep it. Now, I think this next one is more important.
Shall I change the order?
No need. The students are going to rank them according to their views.
So what is it?
Study abroad enhances employment opportunities.
Ugh, why didn't I think of that? Anyway, there's one even more obvious than that.
Let me guess. Study abroad broadens your mind?
Exactly.
Okay. Now we have 10. Let's print off 100 questionnaires and go and do the survey.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 29 to 30. Now listen and answer questions 29 to 30.
Did you hear about the National Geographic Survey of American students between the ages of 18 and 24?
Yes. It sounds as if they could benefit from study abroad. Did you know that only 1% of U.S. students currently study abroad? Anyway, back to that National Geographic survey. It was carried out internationally, and it was Sweden that came out on top.
It's really amazing, isn't it? When given a map of the world, only 13% of American students were able to find Iraq. And the same for Iran.
I know. And not surprisingly, I suppose, Afghanistan didn't fare much better. 83% couldn't locate it on the map. There must be something about that region. 76% couldn't identify Saudi Arabia either.
But Asia didn't come off much better. Over half the students couldn't find Japan on the map. But do you know what's really incredible?
Yes, I do. 11% of them couldn't even find their own country.
It's no wonder the USA scored near the bottom, only 2 points above Mexico, which was ranked last.
That is the end of part 3. Part 4.
You will hear a talk given by a lecturer in the art history department. First, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 40. Listen carefully and answer questions 31 to 40.
In this lecture today, I'm going to introduce you to an American painter, Charles Willson Peale. You may be familiar with his portraits, but did you know that he never even saw a painting till he was a grown man? He was born in Maryland in 1741. His father died when he was 9, and the family struggled financially for the next few years, and Charles became a saddle maker's apprentice. One day, he went to Norfolk for supplies, and there he saw paintings for the first time. He thought they were so bad that he felt sure he could do better, so he decided to make painting his career. In 1766, he went to London to study painting with Benjamin West. Whilst there, he painted this portrait in 1768. See Slide 1, Pitt as a Roman senator. Notice how elaborately symbolical this portrait is. The symbolism arises, of course, from Pitt's famous speech to the British Parliament, where he draws an analogy between the ancient Roman Senate's view of a barbaric Britain and the prevailing European view of the time of a barbaric African continent fueling the slavery trade. Perhaps you didn't know that the Romans used Britons as slaves. But I digress. Back to Peale. He returned to America and in 1772 painted the first ever portrait of George Washington. See Slide 2. In 1773, he painted a group portrait of himself, his wife, mother, brothers, sister, his old nurse, and an unidentified baby. Just look at the slide. This painting is simply called The Peale Family. And you can almost feel the exuberance of the family and their warmth towards one another. He enjoyed great success as a portraitist prior to the Revolution, and served with distinction in the Revolution. During this time, he became friends with George Washington, Benjamin Franklin, and Thomas Jefferson. After the war, he continued to paint, and, when his wife died in the 1790s, as a result of her 11th pregnancy, he remarried. He had 17 children in all, naming the sons after famous painters or scientists. Although perhaps best known for his portraits of famous people, Peale liked novelty. Look at this slide of his 2 sons, Raphael and Titian, life-size, climbing a narrow stairway. This painting, The Staircase Group, 1795, was exhibited in a doorway as a trompe-l'oeil. And it is said that it did, in fact, fool the eye of George Washington. Even as far back as 1772, we can see his desire for difference in Rachel weeping. It's a rather macabre portrait of his first wife crying over the death of one of their children, their daughter Margaret. I'd like to show you one more slide to demonstrate his innovative approach. This is a portrait of his brother, James, sitting at his desk at night, with only his face illuminated by a lamp. This was painted much later than the others, in 1822. You know, Peale believed anyone could learn to paint, and he taught painting to his brothers, sisters, sons, daughters, nephews, nieces, and other relatives. 4 of his sons, Titian, Rubens, Rembrandt, and Raphael, became painters, as did his brother James. Before I finish, I'd like to tell you a bit more about Peale. He was active in politics for several years, and throughout his life, he maintained a lively interest in many branches of science. He was also an inventor who gained patents for a fireplace, porcelain false teeth, and a new kind of wooden bridge. He collaborated with Thomas Jefferson on what was known as the polygraph, a kind of portable writing desk. But it wasn't any ordinary desk. This one could make several copies of a manuscript at once. He also wrote papers on a wide variety of subjects, from hygiene to engineering. Oh, and he also tried his hand at inventing a fairly primitive but innovative motion picture technique, new types of eyeglasses, and a velocipede, which is a precursor to the bicycle. Now, some of the original velocipedes had pedals and some didn't. You sort of scooted along on them using your feet. Unfortunately, I can't remember which type it was that Peale worked on. He's also remembered for his work as a naturalist. He established the first scientific museum in America, and he even invented his own system of taxidermy. For those of you who aren't sure what taxidermy is, it's the art of preparing, stuffing, and presenting dead animals so that they appear lifelike. He was also well ahead of his time in that he placed his animals in a simulated natural environment. His most magnificent exhibit, however, was the complete skeleton of an extinct mammal known as a mastodon, which he helped excavate. The event was memorialized in his extraordinary painting, The Exhuming of the Mastodon.
That is the end of Part 4. This is the IELTS Listening Test. Part 1.
You will hear the secretary of a social club telephoning a tourist information office to get information for a group visit to the town of Tidborough. First, you have some time to look at questions 1 to 6. You should answer the questions as you listen, because you will not hear the recording a second time. Listen carefully to the first part of the conversation and answer questions 1 to 6.
Hello, this is Tidborough Tourist Office, Derek speaking. How can I help you?
Good afternoon. My name's Clara Swift. I'm the secretary of a social club and we're planning a visit to Tidborough.
Oh, yes.
So I'd like to ask you some questions, if I may, to help with our plans.
Of course. We're here to help.
Now, we're thinking of staying in the youth hostel, as we'll be a group and it's quite cheap.
Yes, and comfortable too.
But could you tell me how far outside the centre it is?
Oh, it's not too bad. It's only 1 kilometre from the station, which is very convenient, and 2 kilometres from the very centre of town. There's a frequent bus service.
That doesn't sound too bad. Actually, I've tried phoning them but had no reply.
Ah, you can check out everything you need to know if you go to www.cheapstay.com. That's their own site. It's quite new. And you could email them with your requirements directly from it.
Oh, that sounds good, thank you. We'll be staying in the 3rd week of March. Will there be any special events going on then?
Yes, that includes the 22nd, doesn't it? Good. That's when the street festival is held. It's great fun. Lots going on. It's held every year.
OK.
And when that's finished, if you've any energy left, you and your group might enjoy a concert we're putting on.
Is it classical music or rock?
Well, quite a mixture, actually. The point is that it's all performed by local musicians, and between them, they'll be playing most things.
It sounds a little strange, but I guess it could be interesting. It seems we've chosen a good week to come. Is there anything else on?
Oh, yes, indeed. The City Museum, which was recently completely restored, often has interesting exhibitions. There are some weird and wonderful modern paintings at the moment. That's a good exhibition. Then, opening on March the 24th, when you'll be here, it changes to natural history. I'd recommend it.
Oh, I've made a note of that. Now, some of our group are quite young, and they may prefer to do things that they feel are more active than walking around museums and so on. What will they be able to do?
Throughout March, in fact, the sports centre is going to be closed. But the swimming pool will remain open, And there's the park for general relaxation.
That sounds all right.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 7 to 10. Now listen and answer questions 7 to 10.
And were you planning to go on any excursions while you were here?
Yes, I was going to ask you. I gather there's a very picturesque train journey out along the coast?
The Beach Express. Yes, it's lovely. It's an old-fashioned train. Not an express at all, in fact, but it chugs along, giving you marvellous views.
Does it go often?
No, it's just a tourist special, really. But it sets off in the morning at 9:30, and it's very popular, so I'd get there no later than 9:15 if I were you. The station opens at 9, so you can get a coffee or something while you wait.
It sounds lovely. And for tickets?
Well, as I say, it may be crowded at the station, so it's probably more convenient to get them beforehand from us at the tourist office. The youth hostel may sell them too. You'd have to check that.
OK, I will, thanks. How much are tickets?
£5, although students get 20% off, and if there are more than 10 of you travelling together, you get 15% off, so it's very reasonable.
Yes, that's not too bad. And is it a long ride?
Not really. I think it's about 3 hours actually in the train. You'll be back for lunch about 4 hours later. It stops twice for half an hour so you can stretch your legs, have a little stroll on one of the beaches.
I see. Well, you've been very helpful. Thank you.
Not at all. I hope you enjoy your visit. Contact us any time.
That is the end of part 1. Part 2.
You will hear a director of Hawkins, a large department store, giving an introductory talk to a group of temporary staff on their first day at the company. First, you have some time to look at questions 11 to 13. Now listen to the first part of the talk and answer questions 11 to 13.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Hawkins. I very much hope you will enjoy working here, and indeed that some of you may take the opportunity to join our permanent staff. Now, my purpose this morning is to give you a short overview of Hawkins and a few pointers about working here. Then I'll hand over to Celia, Head of Human Resources, to begin the training proper. Right, now we've seen quite a mixed history in sales recently at Hawkins. 5 years ago, we saw the beginning of a success period as sales climbed at an exciting rate, but then they went flat again for a few years, although we're delighted that they've recovered in the last year to rise again, so the future looks bright. As a company, we have to watch and be proactive about where these sales are coming from. All of you here will be allocated to different departments, but you may be interested to know where your area stands in relationship to others. Hawkins was traditionally basically a clothing retailer, and clothes remain an important part of our business, but over recent years we've seen that reduce as food and electrical have both grown, leaving us equally balanced on all fronts at the present time. This is a situation we'd be pleased to maintain, although the general increase in food spending is predicted to affect all major players in our sector. Well, that's us. What about you, as temporary staff? Where do you fit in? Any business that operates in a changing climate must rely heavily on contributions from a flexible proportion of its staff, and Hawkins is no exception. Last year, we recruited temporary staff into every department, And this year we've done that again, actually increasing the numbers, and we expect to take on an even higher proportion next year. So you'll be playing an important part in our success.
Before you hear the next part of the talk, you have some time to look at questions 14 to 20. Now listen and answer questions 14 to 20.
We regard the Hawkins approach to the retail business as something special. Our mission statement, the guiding idea behind everything we do, is based on quality and is phrased creating value for customers. And this belief applies to every customer and every purchase, however large or small. Happy customers means good business for us, and your main aim must always be to keep customers happy. If any kind of problem or complaint arises, don't try to resolve it yourselves or simply leave it to a colleague, but get the assistance of your line manager. It's his or her responsibility to sort it out. A properly resolved problem will mean we get a loyal customer for life, and that's why we need to make sure that everyone who shops here feels they have had a positive experience, not just a routine transaction. We like to remind customers that everything we sell in Hawkins is high quality. It's the basis of our advertisements. But keep customers informed. Let them know about special offer products. To keep yourself up to date about these and all the other aspects of the company, please look carefully through the newsletter that we publish each month. And something else you'll need to do regularly is to talk with your section supervisor, and you do this in your progress meetings, which will be every Thursday. OK? Right, just a few things and then I'll hand over. I think you were all asked for details of your certificates when you filled in your initial application form. Can you make sure that you provide the Human Resources Office with copies of them by the end of the week? There's a pile of information videos on the table at the back there, and I'd like you to take one each. And please make sure you watch it carefully when you get home this evening. It contains lots of important facts and advice. Will you also pick up your security pass by the end of the day from the office on the 4th floor, as you'll need it to get in tomorrow. Don't forget you'll need it to obtain your staff discount when you make any purchases. OK, that really is it from me, so now, Celia, if you'd like to take over.
That is the end of part 2. Part 3.
You are going to listen to a conversation between 3 university students, Alice, Paul and Michelle. They are discussing various aspects of an upcoming biology assignment. First, you have some time to look at questions 21 to 26. Now listen and answer questions 21 to 26.
Hello, Paul.
Hi, Alice. Hi, Michelle.
Hi, Paul. Where are you going with all those books?
Well, I'm preparing for my marine studies paper.
Really? What are you doing your paper on? I haven't even started mine.
Well, since I've always been interested in communication, I wanted to take a closer look at how aquatic animals communicate.
Communicates? Really, Paul? You think that's interesting?
Well, yes, Alice. Actually, it's been much more interesting than I had expected it would be. I'm finding the information fascinating. I bet you'd be surprised at some of the things I've learned.
Yeah, like what?
Well, much of the world is covered by water, but it wasn't really until the first third of the 20th century that people even began to explore the depths of the ocean. Prior to its exploration, scientists just thought of it as a completely silent world. Of course, today we know it is full of sounds.
Such as?
Well, all kinds of living things in the ocean, from prawns to whales, call back and forth to each other.
How do we know that prawns talk to one another?
Good question. The answer is we listen to them. How scientists do it is through a special device called a hydrophone. Now, what a hydrophone does is convert the sound energy into electrical energy. It's a very clever device.
Kind of like a water telephone?
Well, yes. Quite like that, except the communication is only one way.
Sounds more like spying on animals to me.
Well, I suppose it is to a certain degree. Scientists can hear all kinds of sounds. Grunting, crackling, buzzing. It turns out that the ocean is quite a noisy place. Many underwater sounds have been identified, but even more still await classification. Fish in a public aquarium are quite, well, talkative. So scientists have been able to record their sounds and match them with mystery calls heard from the open sea.
So who's the noisiest in the underwater world? I'll bet it's the dolphin.
You're right, the dolphin is noisy. But by far the most widespread and persistent noisemakers are the smaller animals living in the sea. Not fish, but an animal that lives on the sea floor and grows no more than about 5 centimetres. Here, have a look at this table I've started.
Ah, I see. The snapping shrimp is the noisiest sea creature. This is interesting. It makes its sharp snapping sound with its enlarged claw, which also functions like a water pistol.
Yes, I was reading millions of these animals just offshore have been known to frighten people walking along the beach in Japan.
And this is interesting. It says here that seahorses in an aquarium made such a loud noise that people could hear them from across the room. These little creatures are amazing.
Before you listen to the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 27 to 30. Now listen and answer questions 27 to 30.
Say, Paul, your early research has really prompted me to get started on my own paper. You look like you've already done quite a lot of work on it, but the assignment isn't due for at least another month. Is that right?
Let's see, Michelle. I think you may be a little wrong there. Let me get my class folder and we'll have a look.
I know that our class participation is worth 30%, but what's this assignment worth? Isn't it 40%?
Here it is. Yes. Actually, it's worth 30%. It's the second assignment due later on that's worth 40%. It says here, okay, there are 3 pieces of assessment. There's the 2 assignments and the in-class feedback on student oral presentations, which forms part of assignment 2. Now it says that the first written assignment is composed of 3 parts.
Yes, I recall the professor talking about those, especially the word length for part 1. The research essay, it's 1200, isn't it? It's due in week 6?
Yes, that's correct for part 1, but only 800 for part 2, the field study, which is due in week 7.
Oh, that's bad news. I thought I had much more time than that. I don't know how I could have been so wrong. I guess I need to purchase a diary or I'm going to get left behind.
Yes, I write all my due dates on a monthly calendar which hangs on the wall next to my desk. I found that this has helped me to stay organised. I usually divide the project into weeks. Each week, I set aside some time for all of my assignments. For example, Part 3, the report on findings, isn't due till week 9, but I've already started working on it.
Wow, I'm impressed. I guess you lead a pretty worry-free life.
Not at all. It just means I get a little more sleep than most students around the due date of the assignment.
Well, Paul, you certainly have inspired me. Yeah, me too. I'll be purchasing a desk calendar as soon as I get a chance.
Well, I'm off. Alice, Michelle, it was great talking to both of you. All the best with your assignments.
Thanks. Bye. Bye.
That is the end of part 3. Part 4.
You are going to listen to a talk from a horse expert, Dr. Alan Sampson. First, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 40. Now listen and answer questions 31 to 40.
Hello everyone. It's my pleasure to talk to you today, and I hope that my experience will help you as you choose your course of study here at the university. There are a number of key areas that I want to highlight in my talk with you today. Firstly, I hope to show that there are real career opportunities in the equine or horse industry. Also, I want to point out the qualifications you'll need in order to find employment within the industry. A lot of people look at horse training and other equine activity as being a task that can be done by anyone. I hope to show you today that this is far from true by pointing out some of the typical tasks that those employed within the horse industry are expected to carry out on a regular basis. I think you'll see that our work is far from a simple activity and requires discipline and dedication. Our riding school for young riders and an in-depth look at the principles of dressage, the French word meaning training, I won't have time for today, but we'll discuss in later sessions. And although beyond the scope of my talk today, breeding is also an incredibly interesting area of study which I look forward to sharing with you at a later date. Perhaps I should begin my talk by giving you a broad brush overview of the equine industry and where it's headed. Today, the industry is a multi-million-pound concern. Many areas of the horse or thoroughbred industry, as it is often called, are expected to continue to expand as part of the national growth trend in leisure industries. The large investment of the Middle Eastern countries in the 1980s and the more recent investments from the Japanese has had a large influence in the development of the current strong market for both racing and breeding stock here in England. Currently, the thoroughbred industry is generating more than £900 million per year in exports alone. As you can imagine, opportunities exist in many branches of the thoroughbred industry. In fact, in a number of areas, the industry is really expanding. Here in England, around 50,000 people are employed in the primary equine industry and a further 20,000 in ancillary industries. Of course, as with all other industries, practical experience is essential to prove ability and commitment. Although I said the employment outlook for those working in the equine industry is favourable, employers are increasingly looking for more experience and higher qualifications. Individuals intending to take up study often ask me which courses I recommend. Well, there is a good selection of courses to choose from. Personally, when I began in the industry, I enrolled in a part-time certificate in equine management course. It's a good way to gain a general overview of the industry, but offers only minimal career opportunities for graduates. The Bachelor of Equine Science and Thoroughbred Management courses offer a more in-depth look at specific learning areas. Horse riding theory, grooming and saddling are covered, as well as the more scientific areas such as the history and characteristics of breeds, my current area of research, as well as such topics as anatomy and safety in horse handling. From this degree, students can choose to undertake postgraduate studies. By far, the two most common employment areas for university graduates within the equine industry is equitation, which is, by definition, the act or art of riding a horse, and horse training and management, which involves such diverse activities as instruction, stable upkeep, and horse show entries. For those of you looking for long-term, secure employment within the industry, I recommend undertaking some kind of educational coursework. These days, just to be a stable hand, job seekers are presenting with college certificates, which are increasingly becoming the minimum level of education. Working in racehorse stud management, grassland management, and equine exercise and nutrition requires a Bachelor of Science. And no longer will the bachelor's degree suffice when it comes to specialised equine health and research. Only postgraduates or PhDs are now finding employment in these kinds of areas. I'd now like to take a brief look at the degree to which
That is the end of part 4.
Part 1.
Listen to the conversation between your friend and the rental agent and complete the list.
First, you have some time to look at questions 1 to 7. Now listen carefully and answer questions 1 to 7.
What about the one on Route 9N? It looks like it's big with a library and a deck, but it doesn't say how much it costs or anything else about it.
Oh yes, Mrs. Gaylor's apartment. That one is actually only a 10-month rental and it is going for $156 per week. It's quite a nice place. She only rents for 10 months each year because of horse racing season. Then her relatives all come to stay, so tenants have to move out. It's a little bit inconvenient, but past tenants have really enjoyed their stay there.
Oh, well, we need it for a full year. I guess that one is out. How about the rental on Browen Drive? How many rooms does that one have?
As it says on the list, it has 2 bedrooms and a private kitchen and bath. But it's actually a very small place. That's why it's a bit cheaper.
Oh. Well then, what about the one that has 3 large rooms? Who is renting that property?
That one is a good deal. Mr. John Smith is renting it. But he's quite eccentric and he has a strict rule about no pets.
How about cats?
Nope, absolutely no pets.
Well then, how about this studio apartment rented by Mr. Bo Jensen? How is that one?
That ad is actually a bit deceptive. The studio apartment is the whole upper floor of an older house. It's actually very large and, at $45 a week, quite affordable. And it's near campus.
I think I'd like to check that one out. Do you have a telephone number that we can call?
It's not on the list? Oh, it isn't. Here it is. You should ring area code 518 and then 543-7790.
Thanks. I think I'll call on that one first.
Before you hear the rest of the talk, you have some time to look at questions 8 to 10. Now listen and answer questions 8 to 10.
Hello? 1512, Route 9.
Yes, is this Mr. Jensen?
Yes, it is. Can I help you?
Yeah, we're studying here at university and we came across the rental information for the studio apartment that you are renting. Is it still available?
Yes, of course. I actually just placed the ad and you're the first person to call. Is there anything you'd like to know about it?
Yes, actually there is. As students, we are on the internet a lot, and we heard that some homes in the area have high-speed connections. What type of connection do you have there now?
Oh, that's an interesting first question. But I guess I have heard that too. But we just have a phone line here. Nothing fancy. I think you can have a cable line installed, but it's just a phone line for now.
Okay, well maybe we can do that. What type of heating does the apartment have?
Now there's a more traditional question. We have oil heat here. It's an older house.
That tends to be a little more expensive during the winter, right?
Yeah, but there's nothing to do about it. It would cost too much for me to put in a gas heater. What else would you like to know about the apartment?
Well, we heard it was quite big. Is it furnished?
Actually, yes. I should have put that in the ad. It has an old couch and a couple chairs, a dining table, refrigerator, stove, and even a dishwasher.
Does it have any beds?
Yep, it has 2.
That sounds great. When is the apartment available?
You can have it tomorrow night if you want. I just have to clean up a couple things before you get here. Do you want to come over and see it first?
No, it sounds fine to us. I actually know the street too, so I know the area. We'll take it.
That is the end of part 1. Part 2.
Listen to the guided tour commentary and answer questions 11 to 20. You now have some time to read questions 11 to 20 first.
Welcome to the library tour. We'll begin our tour of this level of the library here at the entrance. Then we'll go in a clockwise direction. So, first of all, over here on the left, next to the entrance, is a touchscreen information service. These computers can be used at any time to get general information about the library and how it works. In front of the touchscreen information service are the catalogues. As you can see, it's a computerized catalogue system and it's very easy to use. The catalogues are linked up to the other libraries at the university. So make sure you check which library a book is in when you are trying to locate a particular item. Next, along here on the left, we have the circulation desk for borrowing and returning books. The returns area, the place for returned books and other items, is at the end of the circulation desk, near closed reserve. Closed reserve, as most of you probably know, is a collection of books that are in high demand, so they are on restricted circulation. If a book is on closed reserve, you can only borrow it to use within the library for 3 hours at a time. Over there in the corner are the shelves for newspapers. The library has an extensive collection of local and international English language newspapers. They are kept on those shelves for 1 month and then stored elsewhere. As we continue on our tour, around to the right, this large central section is the reference section. Reference texts cannot be borrowed for use outside the library. They must be used within the library. All these shelves in the centre of this level are the reference section. Now, the stairs here on the left lead to level 2 only. On level 2 are most of the law books. To go up to the other levels of the library, you have to use a lift. Beside the stairs are the restrooms for this floor. Now, as we walk around this corner to the right, this large room on the left is the Audio-Visual Resource Centre. You can come here if you wish to listen to a tape or watch one of the library's videos. Next to the Audio-Visual Resource Centre is the photocopying room. There are 15 copiers for student use, and we've recently added a colour copier. The system for copying uses cards, not coins. You can buy a photocopy card from the technician in charge of the photocopying room, or from the information desk if he isn't here at the time. On our right, these work tables are for student use, especially for small groups to work together, or you and your colleagues can use the conference room, which is that small room there next to the lockers. You can work on group projects in the conference room without disturbing anyone, and there's a conference room on each level of the library. The round desk in front of the lockers is the information desk. If you need help using the catalogues, or you need to organise a loan from another library, the information desk is the place to come. And finally, here, beside the exit doors, these 2 shelves contain current magazines and journals. Like the newspapers, they are kept here for a time and then stored elsewhere. OK, that's the end of the tour of this level of the library. I'll leave you to look around yourselves now, and if you need any further help, please ask at the information desk.
That is the end of part 2. Part 3.
You are going to hear a conversation between an interviewer and a professor. First, you have some time to look at questions 21 to 26.
Today I'm here with Professor Nittick, who is our new university president. He has been a professor for 20 years and teaches many of the best classes on campus. I know many of you have had him as a teacher and know of his brilliance. Good morning, Professor Nittick. Thank you for stopping by the student station.
Thank you for having me here. It is always great to get to meet many of the students who are involved with our school. I haven't been here since 2 years ago.
Yes, I remember at that time you were still teaching every semester. 2 years later, you're only teaching every once in a while. But it seems like you are still always busy. The administration world is just as busy as the teaching world for you. How do you stay in touch with the university, even with the change in your everyday duties?
I try to stay in touch with what is popular with the university students. I usually spend time with as many students as I can. They usually give me insight into what the new concerns and beliefs are for the new generation. On top of that, I try to be as youthful as I can. I consider myself to be youthful, at least for my age. So I always have a good time and try to stay young. I try my best to not just be a teacher, but also participate in university life.
Interesting. So are you still doing lots of academic work, or are you mostly concentrating on administrative affairs?
Well, I mostly do administrative affairs now, but that doesn't mean that I still don't have a very deep interest in academic matters. I often visit other campuses around the world and meet other professors in my field. I learn the most by travelling and seeing the different places of the world and the different fields of thought. I even did a television programme last month in Manchester.
Will you be on television any time soon then?
Well, you can call the television station and see if I will be on television any time soon. Maybe I will be on the news report. I don't think it is really that significant, though.
Oh, really? That sounds great. I will remember to look out for you. Let's move on. With all your busy travelling recently, how do you find time for your personal life?
I try to keep my university life separate from my personal life. Sometimes it's hard to find time to just take my wife and 3 kids out for a family dinner, but usually we all manage to get together every few days. I'm taking a few weeks off next month to take my family down to South America, to Brazil for a few days. I can't wait to just sit on the beach.
Wow, that sounds like a wonderful trip. Professor Nittick, could you tell the audience a little about what goes on in an average day of a university administrator?
An average day? Oh, I don't think there is such thing as an average day for me. The last few weeks I've been travelling all the time. I can be in Los Angeles in the morning and in New York by the afternoon and back to Los Angeles by the evening. Sometimes I will spend the whole week at a new university, showing the new administrators the ins and outs of running a university. Sometimes I can spend the whole day in the office on the phone, so there really is no average day for me. I guess that is because I do so many different tasks. Sorry to let all the viewers down, but that is the plain truth.
Now look at questions 27 to 30. Answer questions 27 to 30.
Well, I guess I can sum it up for them. You are a busy man. That is probably a good description. So, are there any immediate plans for the coming few weeks?
Well, I'm in Los Angeles for the next 2 days, and then I fly to Colorado to meet a new prospective professor for our university. I will be in Colorado for about a week. Then I go to Japan for the next 10 days to meet with our university branch in Japan about record sales there. After that, I return to Los Angeles for a week, just in time for the graduation of the class of 2001. There you have it, my next month's schedule.
Thank you very much, Professor Nittick. I always enjoy having you on our show. We hope to have you back on our show next time.
That is the end of part 3.
Part 4. First, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 40. Now listen carefully and answer questions 31 to 40.
I'd like to talk about the changes to our leisure time, and I'll start by talking about lifestyle changes over recent years for women. As we all know, the wife and mother of the family has traditionally been responsible for organising and completing household tasks for the family. However, particularly over the last decade or so, we have seen a greater number of women continuing to work after marriage and returning to work after having children. This has significantly reduced the amount of time available for household chores. The result is that nowadays the majority of people own and regularly use products such as dishwashers or microwaves. The modern family often considers hours spent on cleaning and cooking as a waste of valuable time, and generally we are all interested in finding ways of reducing the number of hours we need to devote to such tasks. While washing machines have long been thought of as necessities by families, nowadays so too are microwaves and dishwashers. These goods can drastically reduce the amount of time we need to spend running our home and increase the amount of time available not only to go to work, but also to spend on leisure pursuits. As society develops and we become richer, we put more value on our leisure time and our possessions. The richer a society, the more demanding it becomes. People are no longer happy to work long hours for little return. Expensive holidays, expensive clothes and cars all become more important the more materialistic the society in which we live. Acquiring things and joining the race of acquisition means that modern society spends a lot of time and money purchasing unnecessary goods. Although expensive and persuasive marketing techniques are partly responsible, the demand for such goods often comes from young professionals, those with the money to endlessly upgrade things simply because a better model is made available. Our obsession with the newest and best products available, while good for the economy, can also have a negative impact on the environment. It is not appropriate to overproduce appliances and overuse electricity to keep these unnecessary appliances operating in our homes. We often forget about the damage we have done to and continue to do to the environment. Others opposed to the overuse of appliances and technology also argue that from a social point of view, over-reliance on gadgets means that people are losing the ability to be creative. Traditionally, it was considered an enviable skill to prepare meals night after night for our families. Nowadays, women are more likely to gain approval from others for their success in their careers than their ability in the kitchen. Along with microwaves have come ready-cooked meals, pre-washed vegetables, and our reliance on takeaway food when we are too busy to cook it ourselves. While there are obvious advantages and disadvantages to our increasingly active buying behaviour and changing wants and desires, it is likely that our desire to purchase labour-saving items will continue. So it is therefore inevitable that production of such goods will increase. We can only hope to educate ourselves and our children to buy goods we need, not just goods that are available, and we must also consider their environmental impact. In short, moderation is the most important word for the future. I thank you very much for coming today and listening.
That is the end of part 4.